The next one is really one of the most important section of the Council of the Constitution, and that's the powers of the Council. We have changed that slightly over the last few years, and one of the changes has been to Section G right there, to select subordinate boards, etc. We've changed that to adopt the plan of operations. And Section H, to regulate and license all businesses, exclude people from land owned by the tribe, community labor, and Section 9, to promulgate ordinances for the safety and peace of the reservation residents and to establish courts, etc. That's why we don't have what we call separation of powers. Separation of powers, again, like we talked and Fish explained last week, if we look to the state or the federal government, there's three branches of government. There's the executive branch, that's the president or the governor, and they administer the laws, administer the budget, but they don't get to make laws, they don't set the budget, and they don't have control over the courts. Then we have the legislature. Now the executive branch, they serve full time. Then we have the legislature. Now let's be honest, I think we'd all say that Congress has gotten kind of out of hand. They meet year round, we pay them about $120,000 a year, and gee, I think they've passed less laws in the past 8 or 9 years than ever before. They don't really, legislating is passing laws. The state, however, let's look at them as an example. We're going to elect the new state legislature. In January, they're going to meet. They serve for 90 days, and then they're done. During that time, I just looked it up, between their daily pay and their per diem, they get about $200 a day. But that's only for 90 days, and then they're done. We're not paying them to sit year-round. And so there's money saved in terms of the government, because you don't have a permanent legislature like we do with the U.S. Senate. And lastly, in the state, we have a separate judicial branch. And so across the state, there are people running for district court judge, justice of the peace, and the Montana Supreme Court. And that's a separate branch of the government. We elect those people. There's 2 Supreme Court races going on, and there's a number of districts. Now, we in our area, 4 years ago, we elected, or 2 years ago, we elected a district court judge. In 4 more years, he'll be up for election again. But they're not appointed by the council, they're not appointed by the legislature or the governor, unless there's a resignation. Then the governor gets to appoint somebody just to fill out that term. But the next time around, there's a new election. So that's how we have separation of powers. When we get to go through this whole thing about powers of the council, we'll see that there's no separation there. Either the council runs everything. Now we're going to come back to this when we talk, but under that, Section 2, it says manner of review. And written into our old constitutions that we still have today is the notion that the agent, the federal government, the Great White Father, still has the authority to approve or disapprove things that the council does. Not everything, but lots of things, as we'll see when we go through that. There is an important part there that I've talked about before to councils, and that's future power and reserve power. Future power says the council of the reservation may exercise such future power or further powers in the future may be delegated by the members of the tribe, the Secretary of Interior, or any duly authorized agency of the state or federal government. So to me, that's a concept that means the tribal council don't have all the power. If there's something that's not listed there, then the council don't really have the power to do it. But what we do today is we say, oh, we got all the power. We'll do anything we want. Then there's this next section that says reserve power. That's the only place that the people really are mentioned, but we ignore them. Any right or powers heretofore vested in the tribe, but not expressly referred to in this Constitution, shall not be abridged by this article, but may be exercised by the people of the reservation through the adoption of appropriate bylaws and constitutional amendments. In other words, the people are supposed to be able to give that power to the council. But I bet there's nobody in this room that can ever remember when the council said, oh wait, we don't think we got that power. We better go to the people and ask them if we can have it. We never have done that in my lifetime, and I bet of the lifetime of anybody in this room, have we? So the next article is land. Now that article really hasn't changed too much, and if you look at it, even back then it was the longest article of the Constitution, that we were most concerned with land. There was allotted land, tribal land, leasing of land, and then something that we don't have anymore, and that's called standard assignments. You know, in 1935 we just came out of the allotment era, and the Indian Reorganization Act was supposed to end allotment. Allotment was when we became individual owners of land. And so the idea was that, in my own opinion, was that the people wanted to be sure that those that didn't get allotments would still have access to individual pieces of land that they could use to make an income from. So we had this thing called standard assignments. Tenure of standard assignments, exchange, leasing, and inheritance of those assignments. Purchase of land by the tribe, and use of unassigned tribal land.
Joe, how did the standard assignment stop?
It was just stopped by declaration of the council. Back in about the 60s, the council just said, we're going to stop doing it. And then I think in the 70s, by Charlie Conley, lead of Charlie Conley, we even said that we're going to review every standard assignment. And one of the conditions of getting a standard assignment was you couldn't own any land of your own. By that time, most people had inherited land, even if it was just little tiny chunks. And so that Charlie went through a process and he reviewed every standard assignment. And if you had a standard assignment but you owned land, they gave you a notice of cancellation of that assignment. So today, there are no existing standard assignments. Those have all been converted. The other thing they allowed them to do was convert them to a lease. You could lease it, but it's not an outright standard assignment anymore. So even though it's in there, we've never abolished it, the council no longer honors it. And again, you'd have to come in and say, I have no land of my own, not even an heirship interest. And then you have to find available tribal land. So that's the other issue. As those of you that have been around know, every piece of that tribal ground, even on the mountain front, is leased up for some reason or another. The majority on the mountain front is in grazing leases. And so there might not be a timber lease or commercial lease, but the majority of the mountain front, the tribal land, are in grazing units, and it's leased for grazing purposes. So let's go on. We'll come back to a lot of that stuff down the road. The next thing is our Bill of Rights. And we talked about now, important change there that's a more modern change is back then, and it increased the pool of eligible voters. You had to be 21 to vote. Today the voting age is 18. And so that was a change that allowed more people to vote and recognized it was related to you only got to be 18 to go to the army and to fight for your country. And so a lot of people felt that it was appropriate, I guess, to lower that age limit to 18. We had economic rights, civil liberties, and the rights of the accused. That's something that comes up a lot, even today, just today. I had a person come in about that. And so we've changed that. So right at the bottom it says, excessive bail shall not be required and cruel punishment not imposed. So what is excessive bail? If you've got no money and you've committed a minor offense, but the court says, oh no, I'm going to require a bail of $2,000 in cash. Anybody here be able to put up $2,000 in cash right now? So that's probably excessive bail under the Constitution. And it probably should, the court should look at that and be able to follow it. So the next things were referendum and amendment. We haven't changed those over the years. Now, an important thing that related to what we're doing today is we've talked about that while it may not be the mandate for trying to change the Constitution of right now, it was certainly an important thing that we voted on, and that was the referendum of 2008. So the last part of that sentence says that the outcome of the referendum shall be conclusive and binding on the tribal council. Council didn't allow it to be conclusive and binding, did it? At some point, the council said, we're going to vote to end your effort. We're going to rescind the resolution. Constitutional Reform Committee, you don't exist anymore. But so we've started this saying, we don't need their sanction. We'll go forward, and when we get a document, we'll come in and we'll present it to them. And if they don't vote to put it to a vote, then when election time comes, we'll start voting those people out and put people in who will allow us to vote on that document. So the last thing is what we're doing here is the actual vote that will be on a constitutional amendment or a new constitution. And that says the Constitution and bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of the qualified voters of the tribe voting at an election called for that purpose by the Secretary of Interior, provided that at least 30% of those entitled to vote shall vote in the election. So first, when we have this amendment, our new Constitution, 30% of the eligible voters of the tribe have to vote. So if 3,000 voters is not more than 30%, we got to turn out more people than that. And if we don't turn out more than that, even if we vote in favor of it, it won't pass. So 30% of us got to turn out to vote. And of that 30%, no amendment shall become effective until approved by the Secretary of Interior. It will be the duty of the Secretary of Interior to call an election upon a proposed amendment at the request of 2/3 of the council or a petition signed by 1/3. Now, let's recognize that a third is 33 1/3%, not 30%. So a third is actually more than 30%, or 2/3 of the council. So the council, there's 9 of us. If 6 council members voted to have a referendum and amendment election, that's all it takes for it to happen. We don't have to have unanimous consent of the council. We just have to have 6 people on the council who are willing to put whatever we come up with to a vote. And then once we do that, at least 30% of the people have to vote in that election. Now I'm going to end there, and I guess we'll just look real quickly. The bylaws haven't changed, except to the best of my knowledge, except for polling places. Judges and clerks have remained the same. Meetings have remained the same, except that we changed that. It's no longer Community Hall in Browning. It's at the Reservation headquarters in Browning. The duties of the officers, that's an interesting thing we'll talk about as we go on, because that's what helped create this conflict, this mess that we just went through. And again, this is the original Constitution. So that was the original Constitution. It's about a third, about as third as long as the Constitution that we have today. Oh yeah. We still got to close that somehow.